picking back up with the rock and hip-hop timeline exploration thesis. Listeners, if you... welcome to Dat Fury Radio, first and foremost. I'm Howie Howard from Mr. Furious Records, joined by returning guest Ebony Simon, a.k.a. Lefty Grove, a.k.a. producer Giniss. Wow, we got to get through this, and I got to get more water because my mouth's going dry. But I don't want to stop. This has been so interesting. Listeners, if you're joining us for the first time, please go back and listen to last week's episode, just this once for me, for all the setup and the context. We're picking straight up from there, so you might be a little lost if you haven't heard last week's episode. But do come back for the conclusion, because we've got some great stuff to talk about. We're picking up with year 45 of these genres, which I have time shifted so they start at relatively the same time. That means in the rock timeline, year 45 is 1996, featuring the song 1979 by the Smashing Pumpkins, Beck's album Odelay, Down on the Upside by Soundgarden, and the self-titled debut by Foo Fighters. On the hip-hop side, it's 2018. We've got projects like Astro World by Travis Scott, Daytona by Pusha T, Invasion of Privacy by Cardi B, Swimming by Mac Miller, and some rap songs by Earl Sweatshirt. And Ebony, while you get your thoughts in order, what I was noticing here, particularly on the rap side, is that rock music... Excuse me, did I say rock? I meant to say rock. Particularly on the rock side, rock music is clearly and overtly incorporating references and influences from 20 to 25 years prior, right? Like the Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy has a very 70s sound from a certain perspective. Soundgarden was very influenced by classic rock and classic metal, things like that. So we're starting to get a self-reference thing happening in rock. Hip hop's a little different in that it has always incorporated some of that stuff with the sampling and with, different lines in songs referencing others. There's some of that in rock. I think it's a lot stronger in hip hop. But what are you seeing on year 45?
So for the rock side of year 45, literally this music is selling itself. I still know pretty much every word to Odelay. That Foo Fighters album still gets a run. As a matter of fact, that was what I drove home to last night, was the first Foo Fighters album. I think when it comes to that, the best song that Dave Grohl ever wrote that wasn't on The Color and the Shape is Alone in Easy Target, which is on that first Foo Fighters album. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, Billy Corgan kind of one-man Fleetwood Mac'd himself with Melancholy, and he kind of tore himself down, but also made a great album. Not gonna lie. Mm-hmm. All those albums are good. And then when you look at the hip-hop side of it, everything that I had an issue with in 2013 has completely reversed itself with this 5-year increment, because Astro World's a great album. Daytona's a great album.
Daytona's really good.
Invasion of Privacy, although it's not for me, Invasion of Privacy, outstanding Cardi B album. Swimming by Mac Miller is probably his best work. It's arguably his best work, I will say that. Mm-hmm. And then Earl Sweatshirt is just like... Earl Sweatshirt is the dude that always sat at the back of the class with his hoodie up that everybody thought was going to end up doing something destructive to either himself or the school, but ended up being like the most talented dude in that class. And just being able to incorporate all of that back into it, like 2018 probably saved hip hop in a way. There were things out and there were things that were good in other genres, but like for hip hop, every last one of those albums did significant influences on pop culture and on hip hop in general. So it's almost like it's almost like, the 30-year reunion of the class of 88 when it comes to hip hop, because they were doing some derivative things that were also calling back those earlier eras of hip hop. So your rock note can also be the same thing for hip hop in that same extension. So
I'm glad to hear you say that. I mean, I am not familiar enough with 2018 hip hop that I wasn't going to make that statement, but I'm glad that you see the parallel. And I agree with it for what it's worth. I just didn't feel confident enough to say it.
and these are all albums that I've actually listened to. It's a fair assessment of the mindset of where 2018 was, because 2017, decent year. 2016 was a decent year. But then you get to like 2018 and nobody was putting out bad music, to be honest, locally or internationally. There's a lot of good hip hop out there. So it's also kind of the rise of like grime kind of made a comeback, like UK grime.
Second wave grime.
Yeah. Like that's when you started to get a lot of like the double time, like kids that came up on Ronnie Size and rapping to that kind of stuff. I don't have a lot of names, but I mean, Skepta and Stormzy are the first two that come to mind. Tiny Tempa, which is a little bit before then, but that's another rapper that comes to mind. But then you also had like your standard rappers. There's a group called the Four Owls, OWLS, that are from Great Britain, and that's probably, there's a couple of albums that they have out where like one album they could be like the British version of Hieroglyphics, and another album sounds like it could have been a rap group from Kansas City that just put out a mean record, and it's dope. So that was coming out about then too. So yeah.
You bring up my list is very US centric, and I apologize for that to our international listeners, but this has been like a very US centric exercise. There was some British stuff in the early rock. But
in British hip hop's defense though, they don't really get pushed in America the way that
it doesn't cross over so much here. Not at a mainstream level.
Yeah. There's like,
and I was doing a lot of Googling for this, and because I wanted to get the biggest the biggest projects of the year, which aren't necessarily my favorite, right? So
yeah,
I don't know. I've never listened to Invasion of Privacy.
I liked it. I really did. I think it's probably her best body of work. She's got better singles, but that is, as a body of work, that's a good album.
I have listened to and enjoyed singles. I didn't mean to pick Cardi out of the, I haven't listened to Astroworld either, so I wasn't trying to pick on Cardi there. But let's move it along.
Yep.
Year 50, tiny bit of British representation. That's 2001 for rock. We've got In the End by Linkin Park, Yellow by Coldplay, big signifier. Everybody probably remembers that one. Is This It by The Strokes, and White Blood Cells by the White Stripes. So there was a real kind of
the garage
rock
band
revival, garage band thing happening. Somewhat for real, somewhat press phenomenon as well.
Yeah,
but definitely
I hate to say it, but The Strokes was the press phenomenon.
Yeah, I don't know why you hate to say it.
I mean, it's true, but
they benefited from it for sure.
Yeah, and having rich dads.
Rich dad?
Yeah. The lead singer of The Strokes, his dad started the Elite Modeling Agency. So...
Does that compete with the Handsome Boy Modeling School?
No, because if I had $60, I would join Handsome Boy Modeling School. I would not join Elite Modeling Agency.
We should do there's neither of us probably have time, but I can imagine there's some way for us to do an Elite Modeling Agency homage that's like even worse somehow.
We can totally do it.
Maybe we just do a little EP with like 3 dumb songs on it or something.
Works for me.
And 5 skits. All right. Year 50 in hip hop. That's 2023. So we're kind of reaching the end of our hip hop timeline here. We Buy Diabetic Test Strips by Arm & Hammer. Sundial by No Name. Like by Ice Spice. Hood Hottest Princess by Sexy Red. And Utopia by Travis Scott. And this is where we can close the FD signifier loop with kind of an interesting point, I think. So once again, we talked about this last week. In a video released around this time, possibly the Eminem and Problem with White Rappers video, FD signifier calls this, meaning the current, meaning about 2023 era of hip hop, comparable to rock's hair metal era. And we talked about that, and there's some, I think there's a good point in there. But the way the timelines line up, this 2001 is actually the era of rock that's chronologically equivalent to when FD signifier made that video. And I actually think that point kind of works too, right? That 2023 hip hop is kind of like 2001 rock and the garage rock revival and the amazing stuff in the underground and mix of stuff in the mainstream, kind of.
Yeah.
Some fresh, some very poppy, arguably fresh, some overtly referential to previous eras. I think that kind of point works almost as well.
I don't have any issues with that point being made, just for the simple fact that every mainstream genre of music has gone through that moment once they've gotten to like a 50-year point. There's got to be a year where things don't necessarily line up to be exactly what you're trying to listen to. But there's also like this whole thing, especially with hip hop, where like by 2023, everybody's rapping about Coke again. Like this is like the Griselda era, Freddie Gibbs, Arm & Hammer, Boldy James. A lot of rappers are like talking about things in the streets. Pusha T solo, and then the clips come back. Like a lot of Coke rap in 2023, just for what people are trying to get back to. And I think the Coke rap led back to real MCing being the thing again. And it's just like, we talk about Coke, but I can rap my ass off talking about Coke. So I'm going to rap my ass off talking about Coke. And that's kind of where a lot of things are in 2023 rap wise, unless you're just like completely zoned into a subgenre of hip hop, like the Backpack era, even of 2001, 98, stuff like that. So I get it though. I get what he's saying.
So we're at the end of the timeline for hip hop, just because the future hasn't happened yet is my only point there. There will continue to be wonderful hip hop, no question about that, including from our friends at Datura Records. But just to kind of finish out the rock timeline, I'm going to do 2 more periods and have some comments. And it'll be interesting to see if hip hop continues to track somewhat in parallel. So year 55 for rock, that's 2006. The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, Sam's Town by The Killers, Return to Cookie Mountain by TV on the Radio, a personal favorite. Boys and Girls in America by The Hold Steady, another personal favorite. And what jumped out to me about this year in rock, of course there's been different revivalist movements. We just talked about garage rock in 2001 and different things, but like at this point, like the biggest acts in rock, The Killers, are sort of overtly postmodern and aware of their own form. And the Black Parade is a pretty tongue-in-cheek rock opera at one level, just kind of reveling in the self-aware enactment of a rock opera. Ha ha ha! Isn't it silly? We made a silly rock opera, you know?
Yeah.
And that's not the only level that record operates at. I know a lot of people love it, but that's a strong strain of what's happening. And I think, of course, we've seen that in underground and rapidy rap hip hop, even now and in years prior. So that's nothing new in the genre itself. But it'd be interesting if mainstream hip hop got there, which I don't really feel like it has.
Well, I agree with that. I can honestly tell you that, but by year 55 of rock, I was fully focused on, like, honestly, nothing mainstream when it came to rock. Like, I wasn't I've yet to this day listened to the entirety of the Black Parade or Sam's Town. I do like Craig Finn as an artist, but I wasn't really a Hold Steady fan. But I do think that they write good music. I honestly can say that. TV on the Radio is obviously the standout to me. I was more of a fan of Desperate Youth, Bloodthirsty Babes, because I think that has one of the greatest love songs ever written on it, in Ambulance. But this is kind of like, I would also like to say that just in 2006, I was rip roaring in Lawrence, just partying as hard as I possibly could and hanging out and doing music. So, like, I really wasn't listening to anything but a lot of hip hop at the time. Because, you know, you're running around with Sean and you're running around with Lou and Johnny Quest and, Edwin's still in town, DJ Concept. So we kind of had a small little subset of music going on to where, it's house music, it's hip hop, it's, the things that we were all listening to at the time. So I didn't get a lot of rock music unless it was like super heavy metal back in the 06. So year 55 kind of misses me on that one.
And that kind of is a perfect transition to year 60 where I'm going to conclude, which is, let me list off some records for year 60. That's David Comes to Life by Fucked Up, Let England Shake by PJ Harvey, El Camino by the Black Keys, Helplessness Blues by Fleet Foxes, and New Brigade by Ice Age. There's some more European. I forget where their Ice Age is from, but they're from like Norway or Denmark or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I've ever heard of Ice Age, let alone listen to them. So
it was big. It was like Pitchfork's record of the year.
Pitchfork.
Yeah. Still mattered in 2011.
I was going to say this is...
I'm not a particular Ice Age fan, but when I saw it in my search, I was like, oh yeah, that kind of brings to mind that era.
Yeah.
And what you said about, for 2006, you weren't listening really to any mainstream rock. It was all, more underground, independent, and whatever you encountered around Lawrence. What I noticed is that by 2011, like, I feel like rock having like movements and eras and stuff is basically over. Yeah. Now, there's still incredible work happening. There's great music, some of it underground, maybe some of it more mainstream, more popular. But there aren't movements in evolution that like affects everybody in the genre. It's individual artists, maybe a scene of a few artists or a city or something that kind of get in the cave and come up with something kind of unique.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that sweeps across the genre and that everybody has to contend with the way that Nirvana happened or heavy metal happened or punk happened, Yeah. And I don't expect a movement like that again in rock. It's a mature genre, and mainstream culture has basically moved on to hip hop primarily, and then as hip hop has crossed 50, maybe something else will come along, or maybe the internet prevents that from happening. Kind of going back to one of your earlier points, but that's kind of where I left off feeling about the evolution of rock.
Yeah. I will say that David Comes to Life album is so good.
It's a great
so
album.
good.
I'm not saying that great music isn't happening.
Man, just the simple. I might have to. That's going to be the soundtrack for tomorrow's drive to work, because that's a good album.
It'll get you amped up.
Yeah, it's also nice to see PJ Harvey on that list too, because I grew up on PJ Harvey. That's some mid to late '90s icon. Women songwriters. She was Polly Jean was at the top of that list next to Bjork and Imogen Heap, who was a little bit later on, but there were a lot of good like women songwriters running around out there doing their thing. Beth Gibbon from Portishead. So yeah, that's a really good album too. I've heard that a few times. About the only thing I really don't care for is the Black Keys. I don't know, something about those guys. I won't say they made bad music. They just weren't my thing.
Yeah, they're not particularly my thing either, but I think that was a big record that year. And
yeah, that's the one with that was El Camino, right?
Yeah.
Like Lonely Boy was on that one?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And that I think is a pretty good representation of mainstream rock in 2011, right?
Yeah, sounds about right. By 2011, I think I was full on just listening to Mastodon, I think is like the big band I was listening to in 2011. So, but that's just me. I'm a weird kid and I like what I like. So,
I mean, we're the same that way basically. So,
yeah. And that's the thing. If there's any young kids listening to this or watching this podcast, like what you like. Okay. If somebody changes your mind about something that you like musically and they don't have good points that make you feel like that's something worth doing, keep liking it. It doesn't matter what it is. It really doesn't. As long as it's not weirdly racist or, awkward. Like, and even awkward music is great too. I mean, Primus doesn't exist if it's not for awkward music. So there are things out there within genres you can find that are good and accessible and acceptable for everyone. So, like I said a couple of podcasts ago, don't knock it till you try it. Musically.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for going on this journey with me. It was a longer journey than I expected, but I appreciate all your thoughts, and I think it's fair to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel affirmed that like I think there really is something here, something about the speed at which humans create and develop and exchange ideas and reinvent things and mash things up, and what I came away with from the whole exercise was just maybe it's a little corny, but just an appreciation for humanity, that as we explore and express ourselves in these very different ways, in some sense, there's a common pattern that emerges from all of the chaos and all the interactions and different contributions from different people, and to see the development kind of in some important ways, not to minimize the differences, but in some ways take a parallel path. I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
Almost like traveling, right? And going to another country and seeing, it's like, wow, on the surface, all these things are different, and the food is different, and the construction is different, and the language is different, but everybody's trying to put food on the table, right? Everybody wants to find love. Everybody wants to find connection and enjoy their community. So those deeper themes emerge.
That's the beauty of music, man. It'll bring a lot of people together. Like, I have a lot of really good friends, present company included, that
it brought us together.
Conversations about music is how we had that bond, and we hit it off with that one conversation. And what are we, 4 years later, I'm a collaborator on the podcast with you, and every once in a while I'll just shoot you an email, hey, I made this up, and you'll do the same for me. I don't do that with a lot of people, and most of the people that I do that with, we have a combination of liking the same types of music and understanding that not everything is for us musically. You know, I could almost guarantee there's stuff that I like that you won't, and vice versa.
Certainly.
So,
yeah.
But that doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means that's not my thing. You know, and that's a lot of people get that confused too. Like, you don't have to like everything. You just have to like what you like. And that's good enough.
We celebrate infinite diversity and infinite combinations here on Dat Fury Radio.
Music is the ultimate community builder too. So that's one of the big things that I'm really into. Like at my new job, I talk to a lot of people and I just ask them what music they're listening to. And if it's something that I've either heard of, then I'll be like, hey, if you like this, maybe you'll like this. Boom. Next time I see them, hey, do you ever check that out? Oh yeah, I really like it. You got more stuff like that? Yes, I do. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you for going on this musical journey with me. We're going to let the listeners go. We'll hang out for a second, but we'll let the listeners go. Listeners, we appreciate you. Links to Ebony's music in the show notes or description. And we'll see you next week for another musical adventure on Dat Fury Radio.